Hi, this is Derek. I wanted to do a top 10 video, best favorite movies of 2014. I've been on YouTube for about 4 years now. I usually do these types of lists for the year ending, what have you. Except for maybe one year I didn't do it, but whatever. I like doing them. I like to, celebrate and talk about what I thought were the my favorite or the best or standout movies in the year prior. So yeah, I would say I saw a good amount of movies this year. It was a good year, 2014 for films. I didn't see everything I wanted to see. I know there were a lot of movies that were very well praised that will make a lot of these lists that I simply didn't get a chance to see. So you won't see them here. But that's kind of one of my New Year's resolutions, to see more movies in theaters, get out and see them when they're new, and hopefully talk about them on my YouTube channel, things like that. So that's what I would hope to do. But for now, I think saw a good amount of movies. Saw some films that I thought were great examples of film that moved me in one way or the other, or that were very entertaining, or all combined. So nothing fancy, just me talking about them, and I guess I'll go ahead. So this is my list of top 10 movies of 2014. Number 10 is The Skeleton Twins. This movie was just a pure joy for me to watch. One of the things that I really love to see, and what I've mentioned before, what I find irresistible, is seeing comedic actors take on more dramatic roles. That just fascinates me, and you'll probably see that pattern emerge in some of the other movies in this list. But here, Skeleton Twins, you get two for the price of one. You get Kristen Wiig and Bill Hader taking on dramatic roles, and they're excellent in their performances, playing the brother and sister with a very rocky relationship. Kind of coming together despite all their problems and finding a bond that has been unbroken even after years of estrangement. Just to watch the two together and the chemistry they have is just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And it's interesting to see their performances because they do have these comedic instincts, which you can kind of see coming out of the performance in a more dramatic type of way, if that makes sense. Like they're using their comedic skills towards something more dramatic. It's still a very funny movie. They have this sharp wit that feels very natural coming from the screenplay, but I think it's brought to another level because it does deal with very touchy subject matters: depression, suicide. In one kind of plot point of the movie, child molestation. So I mean, there's heavy subject matter here, but I think they're able to perform it in a way that feels very natural, that still has a lot of humor to it, which is true to life itself. So I think they play the movie, they play their parts in the movie excellently, and I would hope to see more dramatic roles from them. Thought they're both great, both worthy of awards attention, which I hope they've been getting. I think they have been getting a few awards, or at least nominations for this movie. A great chemistry between the two, and Luke Wilson, he's great in the movie too. He's a very entertaining character. He brings a certain type of levity to the movie, which I appreciated. So definitely a very entertaining, moving, and funny film. I won't give everything away. I'm not going to do spoilers in these reviews. But there's one scene where they kind of like do like a lip sync sing off to an '80s classic that I just, such a good scene. So yeah, I loved it. What can I say? Number 9 is Joe. Hey Joe, what you doing around with that gun in your hand? This is a film from David Gordon Green, who is just about the very definition of hit or miss when it comes to directors of note. He'll do these compelling dramas, but then he'll do like stoner comedies, and some of them are good, but maybe some of them aren't. This one is more the compelling drama type of category, which I appreciate here. I think this film does achieve a certain type of greatness. It actually feels almost like a modern, like a neo-western. Sort of. You have Joe, played by Nicolas Cage. He's kind of the pillar of this sort of community here. He's a very flawed man. He's an ex-con. He's trying to go along with his life, but it's just not quite working. He kind of feels like the slightest thing could set him off, and he'll be right back in the big house where maybe he feels he belongs. But then comes this kid who's coming from an abusive relationship with his father, who's an alcoholic and very abusive. and he becomes kind of a mentor to this kid, and it's not really done in like the typical kind of way. Where you feel like he's an absolutely positive influence. He's not, but he's a very realistic and blunt influence on this kid's life. And he kind of sees something within this kid that he recognizes from himself. And so he knows this kid is going along this line that's quite dangerous where he's been before, and he wants that kid to avoid that. So I think it's a very well done story. And like a Western, it leads up to a pretty fantastic standoff at the end, which I thought was really well done. Great performances in this film. Nicolas Cage, easily one of his best performances in years. Probably his best since, I would say, Lord of War. Probably his best since then. Either that or the Weatherman, whichever came first. Or last, I should say. I think it was Lord of War. He's great in the film. It's a very subtle performance. It is a collected performance. It is an internal performance, not what you're typically used to seeing with Nicolas Cage in some of his more, mainstream roles. Where it's like, oh, I'm Nicolas Cage, running around, being over the top, which he's good at. I mean, he's great at going over the top, like Al Pacino or, whoever else goes, Jack Nicholson, he's one of those types of actors, which I really appreciate. But here, some more downplayed performance. You can sense the inner conflict of this man, and I think he's just excellent in this film. I would throw this in the face of anyone who says Nicolas Cage is a bad actor. I think he's one of my favorite actors, honestly. He really is. And I think this proves, once again, his terrific abilities as an actor. Also great in a supporting performance, Gary Poulter. He plays the kid's father. In this movie, David Gordon Green, he's a local. He's not really an actor, but he's like, hey, be in this movie. And so it turns out to be a very natural and true kind of performance, which I think is all the more effective in this film. This is his only film. He passed shortly after the film was made. But here we have captured this great performance from an unknown actor, which I think even if you don't like Nicolas Cage, I mean, that's fascinating as it is, I think. So definitely worth checking out on that. And yeah, what else can I say? Just a very excellent film. It kind of got lost in the shuffle, kind of fell off the face of the earth, actually. It was released technically in 2013, premiered at TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, played there, just kind of disappeared after that. Then at the beginning of this summer, or December 2014, kind of reemerged in limited release and found its way to on demand, things like that. And so it was discovered once more, but it's out there. If you haven't seen it, I would strongly encourage you to take a look because it is an excellent film, one of the year's best. Number 8 is St. Vincent, Bill Murray, starring as the St. Vincent in question of this film. He's absolutely dynamite in this movie. One of his best performances, actually. And it's just a wonder to behold. Just seeing him cooking in this movie and his great performance. I absolutely loved him in this film. It is kind of sort of something we've seen before, like in a similar vein as, say, Joe was. The older character taking the young character under his wing, kind of becoming a surrogate father to him, a mentor to him, sort of. And it's kind of stuff we've seen before. It almost kind of reminded me a little bit about, or a little of About a Boy. It's similar in that sense. And you could probably accuse it, and you wouldn't be too off base, of being, one of those tried and true crotchety old man secretly has a heart of gold type movies, which, it sort of is, but I think it gets away with it because it is so well done, and the performances are so good, and there are enough, kind of twists to it that make it all worth the while. Bill Murray and this kid, just their scenes together are just great, and I like these kinds of movies because it's like you have this kind of gruff old dude who treats the kid like he's an equal, which I think is important. Not really talking down to him too much, treating him like an equal, which I think allows good chemistry between the leads, and there are great performances abound in this film. Melissa McCarthy, also sort of more of comedic actress, known more for comedies, Bridesmaids and Identity Thief, The Heat, stuff like that. Here she is more down to earth. She's a serious character, single mom, trying to get over the horrible breakup with her husband, but still try and be there for her kid, but she can't because she has to work and make a living and all that stuff, which is really good. And Naomi Watts, which I think is kind of like the opposite. She's more of a dramatic actress, but here this is a very funny performance. She's playing like the prostitute who kind of changes her own career into kind of like a housekeeper sort of. She's really good in this movie too, though her accent is, I would say, questionable in this movie. She's kind of like the moose and squirrel kind of character, but I thought she was good and just a very entertaining and funny movie. And yeah, it does have a heart to it that I fell for. I was moved by this movie and kind of the sainthood that is endowed upon Vince of this film. And I really thought Bill Murray was just terrific in this film because, I mean, we have certain impressions of him, which he absolutely, he delivers on, his brand or whatever you want to call it. You see, like, the Bill Murrayisms of his performance. He's older now, he's more selective with his roles, so to see him take a role like this, I think it says says a lot. Sorry, I lost my voice there, but I think it says a lot because we hold him up on this pedestal, but I would say ultimately is kind of a salt of the earth type of guy. He came from like a huge fan. I think he had like 5 brothers and sisters. I think maybe even more actually. So he is kind of he came up from the middle class, and I think something like this is maybe like a tribute to his father or something like that. Not that I would Uh, put a value on the role for him, but it seems like it's a tribute to that kind of person, because that kind of person we all know. So why shouldn't we have a movie where they're explored a little bit more, and the goodness is found within them without becoming too sappy? Which I don't think it becomes too sappy. I think it's just right, and I think it's one of the best of the year. Number 7 is Snowpiercer. I have spoken about this film on my channel. I did a review of it, so I think I said most of my piece in that review. But to reiterate, I think it's a fantastic movie, highly entertaining, with a great science fiction concept to it. It does have a good amount to say about class. It's a very symbolic, of course, with the lower class being in the back of the train, the higher class being in the front, but it's not too over the top, which I found good. And of course, it is this very absorbing and compelling odyssey of these characters, led by Chris Evans in a great role, kind of making their way through the train and all that comes before them. Great action scenes. It is kind of like this American Korean film fusion, which I thought was really well done. So it's a very surreal type of style to the movie, but with American actors that we know. Chris Evans is great. John Hurt is great in this film. Tilda Swinton, just absolutely fantastic. So over the top, but in a great way. She's just amazing. Ewan Bremer, great. Ed Harris, probably the anchor of the movie. He's like kind of like the Colonel Kurtz of this film. So he brings forth the revelations and causes the main character to question his beliefs and put him at that struggle at the end. And that's another thing that I like about the end struggle. It isn't like a big action scene. It is this moral dilemma. So there's a lot more than meets the eye with this film. So you can read into it as much as you want. I think it's open for certain types of interpretation. It's not too over the top with what it's saying about society and class, all that. It's just right. So I think it finds a good balance there, and it's just a visually impressive movie, highly entertaining. Definitely one of the top movies of this year that I know a lot of people are recognizing this time when we're naming the bests. This definitely deserves the praise that it's been getting. Number 6, Gone Girl. David Fincher does another thriller. He can do that in his sleep at this point. If you need a thriller to be done off a best-selling novel, look no further. But I kind of joke about that because it's definitely something where this is a movie where you'll hear this from everybody. I want to talk about it, but I don't want to spoil it because I think it's very important to not have it, given away, because it is such a pleasant and shocking surprise that happens kind of halfway through the movie. But in that first hour, I was kind of thinking, okay, this is fine, but why is David Fincher doing this? And I wouldn't have even given a second thought to what's up this movie's sleeve. It was based on a book of the same name by Gillian Flynn. And I would say, I haven't read the novel, but I would say it probably would work better as a novel. I'd like to read it to get a full impression of that, because that's kind of the world that it's in. It isn't like this, written thriller kind of world where everything has, a certain device to it. And without giving too much away, there's things that you can take from these characters. You have Nick, Ben Affleck, you have Amy, Rosamund Pike, who's absolutely fantastic. One of the best performances of this year. She's just electric in this film. They're both writers, and I think this movie is kind of almost like a love letter to two authors who are married in a strange kind of way. Because one thing to consider is Amy. She has grown up with her parents as authors as well. They have this children's book series, the Amy whatever series, always kind of vicariously living through that, making versions of her life in the form of a children's book that is much better and more pleasant than her life. And so now that the books have ended, you begin to wonder, well, is her life going to continue in some different form or another, and what would the adult version of that be? And so I think that's what's explored in this film without giving too much away, and just a great kind of almost like a cat and mouse thing going on, and it's just, I would say, the only way you can look at it is a black comedy. This is absolutely a black comedy. This reaches a point of such extremes that you can't help but smack your forehead and be like, oh my God, the constant emasculations of Ben Affleck's character. It just becomes so hilarious. And of course, it's very very good satire of the media and how stories tend to explode, and how that Nick character, how he uses that to his favor with the aid of a defense attorney played by Tyler Perry, who's absolutely fantastic. So props to David Fincher for nothing else than giving us the best we've ever seen from Tyler Perry, and probably the best we ever will see. He's great. Ben Affleck is great. I think he's absolutely perfect for this role, because I do think a role like this, with kind of the very black comedy, you need a character, you need an actor, I should say, who at least has some comedic abilities, which Affleck does. I mean, Surviving Christmas, hilarious. No, I'm just kidding. But he's been funny in movies. But I think he finds the absolute right notes to his character, where in one sense you're rooting for him, and in the next you're kind of pitying him, and at the end of it all, you're almost just kind of laughing at him. He's a very piteous character, I would say. But definitely one of the year's best, and one of the year's best performances from Rosamund Pike. She's just fucking phenomenal. And Neil Patrick Harris, of course, who's very great in the film as a supporting character. So, yeah, absolutely. One of the year's best. Number 5 is Whiplash. Speaking of the year's best performances, J.K. Simmons as Fletcher, the music teacher. Absolutely phenomenal. He fucking kills it in this movie. One of the best performances of the year, easily. He's definitely got an Oscar coming his way. Also, Miles Teller as the protege to his master. Great performances from these two actors. As kind of it's a film about paths. It's about drive. It's about wanting to strive to be the best, to go down that path, to get into the best schools, to get the best teacher, to get the best chair, to be recognized, to be immortalized, and to be the absolute best. And what lengths you'll go to that, and what lengths the whoever's teaching you to go down that path will teach you, and if that path is the right path. So it's an interesting film about art and how it can be taught, if it can be taught, if it can be practiced. Which maybe it not necessarily can be, if how this film plays out is any evidence. But you'll hear from a lot of people. This has one of the best endings. One of the stand up and cheer endings. Absolutely does. And what a lot of people have mentioned in other reviews that I kind of stuck in my head while I was watching this, it was almost like a music school version of Full Metal Jacket, which I had in my head when watching it. It's kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, sort of, because the Fletcher character, J.K. Simmons, has this drill sergeant mentality to him, an attitude about him. Uh, though maybe it's more akin to an officer and a gentleman. Louis Gossett Jr. also won an Oscar, by the way. But yeah, and it even kind of reminded me of this interview with Stanley Kubrick. Who did Full Metal Jacket. Interviewer asked him. This is when the movie first came out. He said, "Hey, officer and a gentleman had the same kind of stuff. Do you think it beat you to the punch?" And Kubrick, responded in his Kubrickian way. Well, it's a good movie, and Louis Gossett Jr. fine performance, but there's always going to be that one scene where the sergeant he looks out the window, he looks at his men, and he smiles and just brims with pride. Uh, that's bullshit. I want to make my movie real, which is what Full Metal Jacket is. So I think we have the two of those worlds with Whiplash and that kind of attitude, because you really don't know how much of the Fletcher character is just sadistic asshole and how much he legitimately does want to push his students, in particular Andrew, played by Miles Teller, to be the best, to be the next Charlie Parker. That's what he wants. So I think it has its cake and eats it too, with that respect, because we really don't know. We can't get inside this character's head, but that makes it all the more enticing, I think. And even to the very bitter end, you kind of wonder where the line is, where if he had one impression of the student, if it's changed through that, or if he had some grand plan all along. Who knows? But the ending is absolutely amazing. Really, really as intense as people have been saying it is. And it doesn't work if the music isn't good. The music is fantastic, and kind of as we learn from the film, and not really a spoiler, but great music. It cannot be taught. It cannot be practiced. It cannot be written. It's it comes from the soul. At least not necessarily in those other ways. It's something deep within the soul that just has to burst out, which is what I think we see at the end of this film, which is absolute magic. The great scene between these two actors, just in this kind of unspoken way too. Like, I'd be very curious to see the script of the movie. Like, how can you write a moment like that? It comes from these actors' souls. This magical moment. Such an incredible film. It really is. Definitely one of the year's best. And J.K. Simmons, I would say Oscar is in the bank at this point. Mark my words, he'll win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Number 4 is The Grand Budapest Hotel. Love me some Wes Anderson. Irresistible filmmaker. Has the typical type of quirky style that you'll see with a lot of his movies, but you'll see he's branching out a little bit here, at least in a visual type of way, kind of keeping to a full frame type of movie, similar to the aspect ratios you'd see from films sort of that time, maybe a little bit older than or newer than that film, or than that era, I should say. So it's replicating that kind of time period. I don't quite think he did something like, say, Scorsese did with The Aviator, using only like the color palettes that are available at the time. I don't think he could ever limit himself like that. He's such a meticulous director, using all the colors possible, symmetry obsessed, making all these great sets, these luxurious sets in the hotel of this film and otherwise. I think it's a great film, very, very touching story actually, about kind of a sort of sleazy man, Mr. Gustave, played brilliantly by Ralph Fiennes, who I hope gets some awards attention this year. This is one of his best performances. I think this is a year of great performances, particularly from Ralph Fiennes in the lead role, and also F. Murray Abraham, kind of as the narrator of the story. Well, actually, the movie is like has narration within narration within narration, which is kind of funny and weird. But there was a scene in the movie where I can't really describe which scene it was. I can't really recall, but it came to my head. I'm looking at this guy, he's much older now than when he was before, which is usually how aging works. But I was like, I recognize this face. Who is it? Oh, okay, yeah, it's Simone Goth. from Schindler's List. So, some actors, they'll do these roles where you just absolutely you separate it from everything else that they're known for doing. You know what I mean? Like, you, for example, like Billy Bob Thornton, like. You think of all his usual roles, but they're like, "Oh yeah, Sling Blade. That's fucking Billy Bob Thornton. What the fuck?" Same, I would say with Ray Fiennes in Schindler's List. But isn't it, kind of interesting how this is his own kind of Schindler role, sort of a good man trying to do a good thing, trying to, make up for something in his life, where, you know, the bellboy, he kind of takes him under his wing. Again, another one of those stories. I don't know what it is about this year in those types of movies. But kind of being a mentor to him as well. So there's a lot of mentor protege types of movies this year. They go on this adventure, this odyssey to rescue this painting, to keep it safe because it meant a lot to him. But he finds things in life that mean more to him than that. Securing the hospitality for this bellboy, who he's able to, mentor and make charge of the hotel. And I think it is a beautiful story in a very understated kind of way. Ray Fiennes, again, is just brilliant. Great supporting cast. Jeff Goldblum, Willem Dafoe, Tilda Swinton, again, in a role here. F. Murray Abraham, Jude Law, Jason Schwartzman in a small role, Owen Wilson. Cameos abound as well. Yeah, I think it's just a really nice story. I think it is absolutely one of Wes Anderson's best films. Beautifully written, and I think it has one of my favorite lines of dialogue from this year, kind of like the closing of the story when F. Murray Abraham, he's come to the end of the story, thinking about Mr. Gustav, and what he says of him. There are still faint glimmers of civilization left in this barbaric slaughterhouse, once known as humanity. He was one of them. What more is there to say? What more is there to say? Well, Grand Budapest Hotel, one of my favorite films of this year. Excellent Wes Anderson film. Excellent film, period. Number 3 is Nightcrawler, a fantastic film. I would say it has a similar effect. Anybody who filled up their car with gas after seeing Syriana has a different impression of it, which I'd say be the same kind of effect for watching the morning news or evening news or what have you. Essentially what this is, it's fear as commerce. Fear is something valuable, that we have this whole subworld going out, and it is like an oil rush. There's oil in those hills, those California hills, and they're out to get it with their cameras. It's a commodity. It's something valuable. It goes to the highest bidder, basically. So I think that's a fascinating world, this Nightcrawler world. That this film has revealed to us, led by Jake Gyllenhaal in an absolutely fantastic performance, an absorbing, scary, seductive performance that evolves and evolves, and I think he's absolutely tremendous in this film, and it just plays out in brilliant and unexpected ways. For example, you'll see movies like this where you have I'm not giving too much away here, but there's a cop character who's kind of getting wise to Gyllenhaal's not so ethical methods of getting his footage, where you kind of think that's going to become a subplot of the movie. That's going to become an important part of the movie. But it doesn't play out exactly like that, which I think is done really well, because I think this is a more frank and realistic world that's being explored here, which makes it all the more unnerving. This is an unnerving film, but it's brilliantly acted, and it has a great atmosphere with some very tense scenes as well, and again, all led by Jake Gyllenhaal. Powerhouse performance. I would hope he gets nominated for an Oscar this year. He would definitely deserve it. Number 2 is Life Itself. I admit bias here. Roger Ebert, one of my favorite people ever. But I do think this is an incredible documentary. Absolutely incredible. Not just for exploring and celebrating this great film critic's life, who has brought us so much insight into film, and done so much for film criticism, and just written so many beautiful things, and kind of brought less than mainstream movies to attention with the At the Movies show, and there's all that. It explores all that. It explores the great man that he is. But with Steve James, great director for documentaries. I think this is almost like Roger Ebert taking control of of the story of his final days and the story of his life as well, life itself. So it does tell a story in a very specific type of way. It reveals certain things that are important to kind of what's unfolding in front of us, which is real footage, a real occurrence. This is really, Roger Ebert's. We see his last days on film, which is kind of jarring, but at the same time fascinating and very emotionally gripping. And that he trusted this director to to be as candid with that, I think says a lot of what he was doing. Sort of. So it reveals things that I think are quite important to this story that is being told with this real life documentary. For example. His drinking problems and things like that, and how he could have died, but something kept pushing forward, and how his colleague, his kind of sort of like his antagonist, his kind of older brother, Gene Siskel, how he fell ill, and he kind of kept it a secret, and how Ebert never wanted to do that. He wanted to be as revealing as possible, as evidenced, by all that. He's been so open about. One of the big moments was, he was on Oprah and showing himself as he was, even though he was disfigured, and kind of just sharing it with us in this film, which I think is interesting. And also another way, it shows kind of his stab at Hollywood, making that Russ Meyer film that was pretty much trash and, not really making a great film. Isn't that kind of ironic, speaking about great films, writing about great films, celebrating great films, but not making one your own? I think this is that film. I think this is a film somewhat by Roger Ebert. You notice it kind of in his eyes, these always thinking eyes. That's almost all that's left, where he's almost directing the story of his own life in a way. Because you get a sense when watching this that he knows. He knows, his days are numbered, but he's, trying the best that he can to, get in cooperation with Steve James to tell his story right. And I think he does, and I think he does it justice. So it's a great film about all that. And above all, it is a love story about him and his wife, Chaz, who's with him through everything. They play the song "I'm Your Man" by Leonard Cohen, which I thought was a great moment in the film. So I think these were the final strokes to a great career, ending with a great film, a great documentary. I freely admit bias, since I am a fan of Roger Ebert, but I think it's one of the year's best. I think it's absolutely worth seeing if you haven't. And my number one pick for the best movie of 2014 is Foxcatcher. This is a harrowing and unforgettable film. And it's come as kind of a surprise to me that Bennett Miller would emerge as one of the best American filmmakers of recent years. This is his third feature film after Capote and Moneyball. I think it might be his best yet. This is a very, very captivating film and a dark and entrancing film about, essentially, about power. And how one can have power over people so effortlessly, while others may be driven mad by the mere attempt, and also a quest for greatness as well, but not as a crowd pleasing way as Whiplash was. Steve Carell, excellent career-defining performance. Again, a comedic actor taking on a dramatic role. Now, this is, it's not a very showy performance, which I think may go against certain expectations. It's a very understated performance, and it's an impenetrable performance, which I think is quite necessary to what he's trying to do. John DuPont has this sort of mentality to him that's a little antiquated. He feels as if he's, some kind of a general in this Cold War that's training these Olympic athletes would mean victory and greatness for the United States, trying to maintain this DuPont legacy. And Channing Tatum's character, Mark Schultz, he has this soldier type of mentality. He's willing to follow, but how much he gets kind of tangled into it, he underestimates that, and it becomes a little bit more than he bargained for. Meanwhile, we do have Mark Ruffalo's character, David, Mark's brother, who is more of the natural type of leader that John DuPont just can't seem to be. And he has this very quiet reserve to him. He has a calmness, and he's able to follow in this, to lead in this very natural kind of way that John DuPont cannot do. And there is kind of an envy between the two of them, and there is this power struggle. It is a movie about control. Even we see the DuPont character, he has someone who's controlling him as well. His mother, as we see in one really great scene between him and Vanessa Redgrave plays his mother. A really great scene between the two where we learn of the control that she has over him. And when he has no one left to control him, that's when things sort of get a little out of hand, and the character begins to crumble, where it almost becomes like the Foxcatcher Ranch almost becomes like this cult. They even have like the uniforms and everything. So it's a very unnerving film, and it's something that I just wasn't expecting to be as unnerving as it was. But it's just such a I don't know. The more you like a movie, the harder it is to describe. But I thought this was just an absolutely brilliant film, and I think it's the year's best. What can I tell you? Great performances, a very entrancing story, and this is something that's stayed in my head. It's kind of haunted me a little bit, and I think it has the energy and the focus of kind of like a movie from the 70s or so. This is a movie that rewards your patience, that will encourage you to kind of interpret the characters as opposed to having them just shown as is for you, which I love a movie like Whiplash, but the performance you can take at face value from J.K. Simmons. Steve Carell's performance, I think, is quite a bit more layered and impenetrable. So, it's something that I really think took a lot from whatever this actor had inside him. And I even looked at some footage of DuPont himself and how he captured these like little character habits, these little traits that he captured so perfectly. And I think he emotes perfectly. Like, it's not an impersonation, but it is an interpretation. I think it's a brilliant performance. I think it's a brilliant film. The year's best. What else can I tell you? So that'll be my top 10 of 2014. Hope you enjoyed watching. Hope this wasn't too long. I don't know how long it's going to end up. Maybe I'll cut a little bit out. But yeah, so I hope you're enjoying 2015. Here's to more great movies to come. Thanks very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to me, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up if you want. Leave a comment. All that good stuff. And I'll see you later.